Hi, I'm Dave, welcome to the channel. In this video, I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. So if you've been watching this channel for a while, you'll know I bought a Pioneer charger, very cheap because it was a factory second, and I showed it to you before when we did a video. This is part 2. In part 1 I said I didn't really like the paint scheme on this and it was going to have to go. So let's set about that. The first thing we need to do, of course, is separate the chassis from the body. And we'll discard that. Our job 2 is remove all the bits of plastic from the body that are parts of the interior and the trim and the glass and everything else. There's a few bits that are held in with melts. You can use a soldering iron and unmelt them and pull all the bits off. It's not that difficult. They all come off fairly easily. And then we have a stripped body shell. Having done that, we need to get the paint off it. So here's an old Carrera slot car box and some very strong isopropanol alcohol. You need to be in the 90% to 100% range. You won't get 100%, but you know, this is 99, I think. Now ordinarily, a few hours in here, scrub it with a toothbrush, should be fine. However, I don't know what they use for the lacquer and for the stickers on these Pioneer cars, but it was tough. I think I ended up about 2 days and trying it every now and then with a toothbrush.
One eternity later.
And eventually, as you can see, it's black underneath. So that is not all, but most of the paint stripped off the original body. So I should probably qualify what I mean by I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. Yes, I've now stripped the body shell and it is paint free, and that's great. And you're thinking, well, he's going to paint it. He knows how to do that. He's done that before. Yeah, I do. But before I paint it, I want to modify this body. Now, this body is a street body Dodge Charger. You can see it has a recessed rear window. The Charger 500, which was run on the ovals for USAC and NASCAR racing, as you can see from this Carrera one, has a flush rear window. So what I'm going to attempt to do is convert this into this kind of a rear window. Now, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never modified a car body before. I've got a few ideas. I've got some various thicknesses of plastic card here, which I may be able to cut and glue in. I'm not quite sure, but I'm going to need the window, and the window is pretty much full width. So if I'm going to cut a window into this, I'm then going to need some clear plastic, and the sides here of whatever I cut here are going to be very weak. I'm not sure that's going to work very well. I've got this in a Robert Swift Slots kind of recycling things way. I've got this clear plastic from a pack of round wire nails, which I could then use to make the window, but then I've got to cut the aperture in this, and this isn't the same thickness as this, so then there'll be a ridge. I'm not sure it's going to work. What I'm going to try first, I think, is to use just the clear plastic, even though it's slightly flexible. I think it might get supported well enough in here. And if I mask off what will be the window and put masking tape on it and then stick it in and glue it in and smooth off the edges and then spray the body, and then very last thing, peel the masking tape off the windows. I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm going to give it a go and we'll see what happens. So to start with, we'll just get a piece of paper and try and stick it on there, and then use that to make a template to cut out the plastics. I'm going to line the bottom of the piece of paper up with where I think the bottom of the piece of plastic will be, because that's one less thing to try and trim later. And I just stick that other end to the roof, so that piece of masking tape's right out of the way as well. And now what I'm going to do is just press on the edge with my finger of where the infill piece is going to be, and just rub the paper, and you'll see a crease starts to appear. And if I get a pencil and just lightly shade across the edge of that, that will define the line a bit better for me. So that, in theory, is the shape that we need. So I just quickly cut that out. And I'll stick it just back in, just to check where I think we should be. It's not far off. It can be a little bit big, because whatever we use, we can sand that down later to make it fit perfectly. Now obviously I also need the position of the rear window, and luckily, because I've got a car that is the right body shape with a rear window in it, I can use the same method again just to find the position of the window on the template that I've cut out. So I'll stick that back down onto the Bobby Isaac car. I'm sure he won't mind. And again, just trace round and find where the line is. It's like doing brass rubbings when you were a kid. So that is the infill piece and the location of the window inside the infill piece. So obviously cut the window out. And I've gone for two options, as I said before. I've cut out a piece of that plastic packing, the same full shape and size as my template. It's a bit flexible. And I've kind of gone through this process, so I'm just going to show you what I tried. I looked at putting it in there, and look, it's just a bit too flexible, I think. Even with the sides glued down, I thought it would be tougher, but I don't think it's going to quite work. So I'm reverting to a bit of 1mm plasticard, which I've kind of roughly cut out. Again, you'll see it's not perfect yet. We can fettle the edges later, but that does look like it's, broadly speaking, going to be about the right sort of fit. Now there's this other piece in the back here. The interior fits on those two crosses, so I can pretty much cut out all of that rear piece of extra bodywork that doesn't need to be there, and those kind of side cheeks on that recess as well. And I'm going to keep this little piece of clear plastic and probably use that to make the windscreen later on. So it's Dremel time. That's got most of it out. Let's just check we haven't gone too far. Yeah, that's okay. Bit more trimming then. Let's do these side pieces. Bit tricky to get the Dremel wheel in there, but I'm going to use it more as a grinder than a cutter, being very careful. If you put too much sideways pressure on these little tiny discs, they snap and fly all over the place, and yeah, mind your eyes. But I find if you're very gentle, you can use them as much as a grinding wheel as a cutting wheel. And with all the cutting done, it's time to just clean the rest of it up with the edge of a file. Those discs do, as much as anything, melt the plastic, so you kind of get these sticky sharp burrs and things on the edges. Now, it doesn't need to be super neat under here because, quite frankly, nobody's going to see it. But it does need to be fairly smooth edged. So there we are, that's all of that done. And that piece should fit in there. Like I say, don't pay too much attention to the wonky shape of the window aperture at the moment. We'll resolve that later. So I'll just stick that on there in place with a couple of bits of masking tape, and I am going to use some proper old-fashioned Humbrol polystyrene cement. Now this stuff's great because it does give you a little bit of time to reposition things if they're not quite right. But once it's in there, it starts melting the plastic together. It's like welding, but plastic. So I can just run a bead of this round the inside of the join and a little bit of capillary action and some squeezing, and that should get the glue everywhere it needs to be. And I've still got a little bit of time just to adjust the position of the infill piece on the top before I leave it to set. That should do. And then I'll run a bit more glue around the inside just for reinforcement, and use a load more bits of masking tape just to stick everything in place so nothing lifts or curls while it's drying. As you can see, that's all set now, so we can take the masking tape off, and it's starting to look a bit like a Charger 500 body now. And all I have to do now is add in a little bit of filler along the bottom and do a bit of sanding and a bit of filing around the edges to lose that join line. So small file and some, I think this was about 260 grit, 240 grit sandpaper with a lolly stick, because that makes quite a good small sanding block. So off we go. Let's try and smooth off the edges here a bit. Get rid of that join.
One eternity later.
And it was. But you can see that's now looking quite a lot better. And I've run another line, if I can just catch it in the right light. Ah, there we are. There's another line of glue just along the bottom there as the filler to remove the step between the piece of plastic card I've put in and the original body, so it looks like it's all going to blend. And I can sand that back once it's gone hard.
One eternity later.
Another one, yes. And there we are. That's now starting to look quite a lot more like a smoothed in thing that was possibly there all along. There will be an awful lot more sanding, filing, filling, resanding, and eventually it will get to a point where it's nice and smooth.
One eternity later.
Another eternity later, And there we are. You can almost not see the join. There's still a little bit more work to do, and I've put a coat of white car primer over it, because once it's painted you can see the little blemishes and lines better than beforehand. And you can see this is what we started with. This is what I was aiming for. And it's getting close. It's not quite there yet. A little bit more time, a little bit more work, and it should really look the part, I think. So I'll just put it back on its chassis for the time being so you can see where we are at. I've just filled in the door mirror as well, because the car I'm going to recreate didn't have a door mirror in there. That again needs a little bit of sanding off. But mostly I think the 500 rear window conversion has worked out quite well so far. And yes, I could have just got a Carrera car and stripped it and repainted it in the colours that I want, but if I'd done that, I wouldn't have learnt anything, and I'd have started with a more expensive car in the first place, so if I'd ruined it, that would have been more of a terrible shame. As it is, started with a cheap car, seemed to have done all right, so hopefully this plan will come together. So more about that another time. Thanks for watching one of my videos. If you liked it, you'll find a button specifically for that. Please subscribe to the channel, it all helps, and if you hit the bell, you'll get a notification when I post the next part of this video. And of course, check out this slot car channel. It's a year old now, the Talking Utter Slot Car Podcast. Couple of grumpy old men talking about every week about slot cars. What's not to love?